Audio Crime 2 has been a long time in the making. Since I started writing music in 2008, I have left many of my tracks unfinished, and I've accumulated a lot of loose ends that didn't make it to my previous albums. That stuff has been weighing on me all this time, and I finally wanted to be done with it so I could start afresh with a blank canvas. So the plan was initially to bundle up all these songs, to give them a quick spattering of polish, to release this album, and then to start on a new one afresh. And it was that new album that was where my interest lay. But the more I tried to finish up these old tracks, the more I grew to love them all again. These are mostly decade-old songs that I tired of listening to long ago, but for each of them I found a different way to break through that stagnation and to drive them on to completion. Some have trundled predictably on from where they started, while others have seen abrupt U-turns and have become something completely different. Each has been a different challenge, and I've found it all to be greatly satisfying as I've seen each and every one of them grow into full-fledged songs that I never thought they would become. Some of these songs started their lives 15 years ago. In this time I've abandoned some songs, then salvaged bits from those songs to help finish other ones, but now both songs have made it to this same album. Awkward. So because of this, you'll find riffs and tunes and instruments shared across several songs in this album. Audio Crime 2 really is a criminally incestuous mix of everything I've ever done, comprising of remakes, remixes, and sequels. You'll find all these songs available for purchase on Bandcamp and on all of the streaming services. It's best to listen to them there if you don't want to hear me babbling on about them. But in this video, I will be talking about each of them and how they ended up here. But what better song to start Audio Crime 2 with than the Sax Offender? This is a Jimmy song in all but name, being a series of tunes that I've made with horrible sounding instruments or irritating sounding tunes. And the Sax Offender takes all this to new heights, being the tale of a saxophone player who thinks he's better than he really is, intruding on all other tunes and generally saxing where he isn't wanted. It was an unreleased song from Jimmy's Unlikely Resurrection 2, which was a game that I made back in 2012. Back then, this tune sounded like this. However, over the course of this past year, I've built on this tune, added bits to it, and I've playfully experimented with hundreds of different compositions, and although it doesn't sound like it, it is now one of the most complex songs I've ever managed to piece together. So it's only fair that this tune sits pride of place on my A side, with the rest of the songs from that game relegated to the B side. The second song, That Night Before, shows how far this album has come. This song and its more energetic brother were meant to be the highlights of this album, sandwiching the rest of the songs in between. But plans changed, the other tracks grew, these remained the same, and now I consider these to be the most boring tracks on the entire album. But if you liked the first Audio Crime and wanted more of that style, then these do fit the bill. They were written for a video game that I never made about two children going on a Christmas quest to the North Pole to find Santa. It was going to get rather depressing, with the only way they'd survive being if they had grown cynical enough about the world on their travels to turn back before stepping out into the endless snowy wastelands. If Dying Children doesn't earn these tunes a place on Audio Crime 2, then what will? This next one, being the Going Low in CSGO theme, is a song with a torn identity. It was the song I made to study the Deus Ex theme tune and to try and figure out what made it sound so good despite sounding like it had been played on a cheese grater. I then named it Devs Ex, to pay homage to its origins whilst still giving it its own identity about a psycho killer girlfriend that Dev can't escape from. Sadly, this song is a victim of its own success, and since it's so well known as being the Going Low in CSGO song, it has to remain as that, in name and in spirit. But I don't think this song has ever fully been at home anywhere. But that's okay, because Audio Crime 2 welcomes all with its open, murderous arms. The next song is already released. It's Atomic Amnesia 2020, which I made in 2021. But it deserves to exist here as well, as it's a very true spiritual successor to the most popular track from Audio Crime 1, also known as the Case Unboxing Millionaire song. And it's this track that got me back into music making again, so it's at least partially responsible for this album that you're currently listening to. How do you make a sequel to a song that people already like? You don't. But with this one I tried to, by getting all of the same instruments, by reversing all the tunes of the original, and by messing about with that until I felt the song had its own identity. I much prefer it. It's a lot more sophisticated than the original was, but you won't care about all this because you'll still prefer the original. And that's fine. I didn't expect otherwise. I did this for me. Me. This whole album's for me. And I like the final bit of this song so much, and revisited it so many times on my MP3 player, that I made it into its own short standalone track, which you can hear later on in this album. Because guess who will listen to this album the most? Me. Henry Vile. This is a bit of a meme in the family ever since my sister thought that Henry VIII was pronounced Henryville. But I already named one of my dad's songs that, so this one had to be Henry Vile, in keeping with this album's theme. Because beheading women must surely earn this track a place in Audio Crime 2. This track started its life in Scrumpy Ninja and the Case of the Bad Eggs, which is an uncharacteristically happy little game of mine about an Easter bunny collecting eggs, which I submitted for a game making competition, which I eventually won. But don't be too impressed because there were only 2 entrants and the other was just a movement engine, and the judges still thought it was close. The version of the song that game used sounded horrible, really grating instruments and stuff. You can hear it playing right now. It wasn't even good enough to earn a place on Audio Crime 1. However, I have long believed that using orchestral instruments is cheating, because whenever I make a song using them, I notice people immediately like that song more than all my other ones. So this was the experiment I did with this song. I simply got that annoying song I didn't like, swapped out all its instruments for orchestral ones, threw in a few bell noises as well, and if you like it, then know that you've been tricked into thinking it's a good song. But at what cost? I blew this album's entire orchestral instrument budget on this petty little experiment. But don't worry, I'll be back with a brand new banger orchestral track for Audio Crime 3. I promise. Something Rotten. This is the first original song on the album and ushers in the much stronger second half of Audio Crime 2. Have you played Final Fantasy VII? No, of course you haven't, because you're under the age of 30. It had a very depressing, grating sounding tune called Underneath the Rotting Pizza. When I made a tune with a similar sounding instrument, I knew I had to make it into a tribute song for that. I released it years ago in a rather basic state and called it Under the Pizza, together with a disgusting looking, dripping, slimy looking toadstool. So you can check it out on SoundCloud to hear how it sounded 6 years ago. But since then I've elaborated on it, blessing it with better instruments and a really morbid, drippy, bubbling kind of sound. Picture the scene. For this song you come across a rotting body of some sort, discoloured and bloated and covered in exotic looking fungal cultures. The sight is hideous, the smell of death thick in the air, and your fight or flight instinct should kick in, yet it doesn't. And a third instinct kicks in that you never knew you had. To your horror, it draws you closer to the corpse and you begin inquisitively poking at it. You lift a swollen leg and the foul-smelling gas is released from a nearby orifice. You try to force yourself away from this corpse, but grab a flabby bit of belly on the way and it tears off like wet tissue paper in your hands, with murky liquid bubbling and splattering out of the hole left behind. Mushrooms are growing from the eye sockets. You know you mustn't get closer, but before you know it, you've bitten some off and are crunching on it. What is wrong with you, you sick, sick monster? Well, that was pleasant. This next song, Light Cubed, was for a quick little flash game I made while I was at university. It sounds a bit soulless now, but I think the whole thing punched above its weight for the time. For this album I've refined that game's tune a bit, I've extended it, and most importantly added some tactical piano, which in my opinion makes all the difference. Light Cubed also borrows a tune from my older song, Ancients, which was definitely the worst track from Audio Crime 1. I like it better this time around. Yeah, that song was a bit noisy, wasn't it? But it set the stage for this next one. I know that my remake of Atomic Amnesia was unpopular, but I think this sequel to That's Life will be much more positively received, because it's almost the opposite of the Atomic Amnesia remake. Here, I've kept the same song as in the original, but I've replaced the instruments and it sounds just generally better. It's also the only song I've made on an odd time signature. Or maybe it isn't, I'm not sure. It just manages to sound simultaneously faster and slower paced than how it would have done otherwise. I mean, don't ask me what's going on here, I don't know anything about music. If you know what's going on here, then please let me know what the term's called. I just know it must be a bit unusual because one of the remixes somebody did of the original did away with this time signature, which is a shame in my opinion, but it is really interesting that they did that because it clearly proves that there's at least something a bit unusual going on with this song, and I think that earns its place in audio crime too. See what you think. The next song is probably why you're watching this video. Crossing Those Islands is played in many of my videos. It's the main menu music in my Counter-Strike music kit. It's the one song of mine that doesn't sound like a song of mine. It pays homage to Final Fantasy IX's world map music and was intended for a future Jimmy game to be played alongside my older track Die Jimmy Die, and it started life sounding like this. But then luckily, I had a great idea. I was like, why don't I use nice instruments for a change? And it quickly became the song you know it as today. But there's a problem with that. This is an album of remixes and remakes, and this song needed extending to reach song length. But I didn't dare change the bits of this song that people are already fond of and familiar with already. So I just carried on from the end of the known tune, mixing the existing instruments and tunes around in different ways. By doing this, it means that if you only like the bit of the song that you know already, you can stop listening after the first bit. But if you want more, then hopefully the rest will have value to you. I'm happy with how it's all turned out, but it is still a crime to have modified the original song in any way. Just like Atomic Amnesia 2020 was a reverse of the original Atomic Amnesia song, Happily Ever After is a reversed version of my older song called Lies. This is actually how the song started off, but I could never think of an ending to it, so it's been left unfinished for 12 years. But in making this album, I thought of an ending to it, and the latter half of this song is by far my favourite segment. You can tell when it starts because the beat changes and the song starts sounding happier. The only problem with it is that you have to listen through the first half of the song first, and I've got really bored of listening to that over the last decade or so. This song gives me hope for the future because it makes me think I have actually got better, and have in some way been held back by the age of some of these songs that I've been working with on this album. And here's the short segment from the end of Atomic Amnesia 2020 that I like so much. Maybe I should do the same with Happily Ever After as well. Oh well. I've had sequels, remixes, remasters, now for something a little bit different. Thanks for Test Sub is a new song made almost entirely of bits from the rest of the album. This gave me an interesting degree of freedom, and I have to say, it's one of my favourite songs that I've made. So I hope you enjoy this one. And finally, That Morning After, which is the energetic cousin of that song you heard near the beginning. This is a music album, and so the music has to come first. But with the A-side now covered, I can finally talk about the album art, which is probably the most fun bit to talk about. And yet, it was all an afterthought. It's something I knew I had to make, but I put off making it until the very end. I knew it had to have somebody dead on the floor, and I like the idea of making it in the same style as the first Audio Crime album. But some people have told me this looks like a guy dancing. I didn't want that to happen again, so I felt a backdrop of some kind was in order, which complicated the process massively. Plus then there was the hassle of deciding between AI-generated backdrops and the hassle of making it for real. So I compromised. I went to great lengths to make it for real, but ensured it looked as AI generated as possible. Now, I'm not against using AI generated images. I actually really like them and often find them better than the real life alternatives. And I did generate some that I thought made for great album art, but I'd always choose ones that looked pretty as a picture, yet failed to be so impressive when shrunk down to a thumbnail size. But the main reason I didn't just AI generate this album art was because I wanted to conclude the making of Audio Crime 2 with a memory of my own, and so I set out into the windy, rainy night to find that closure. And I found inspiration for it in the most mundane of places. I went to some seedy, graffiti-laden mud bank underneath a main road and took night shots until either I got the shot I wanted, or I myself was shot and had my camera stolen. And what a shame that would have been had that happened, for this album would never have been released. But luckily that didn't happen, and I got the shots I wanted. I was considering lying on the floor for real, but it was super wet and muddy and I decided against that. Even at this point, I was imagining the album art to be full of vivid colours and awesome looking shadows all over the place, but once I got home and looked at what I'd taken, I settled on a very simple, bold design with even less colour than it had in real life. I didn't even shade my body properly. The design I chose goes against everything I stand for, yet shrink it all down to the size of a thumbnail and suddenly it looks great. The bold outlines of everything remain, and the mirrored concrete posts now spell out 2 in a way that I totally didn't do intentionally, but somebody remarked on how clever it was and I was like, yeah, I totally meant to do that. And best of all, I remember those few hours I spent standing around underneath those roads doing time-lapse photography and sweating because I thought it was going to be much colder than it actually was. And now, every time I drive over that road, I can point to it and say, that's where I died. You can't do that with AI. And that's it, Audio Crime 2. There's also a bunch of B-sides I shan't show here, but I'll quickly summarise what they are. There's the Jimmy ones, which are more primitive sounding cousins of the Sax Offender song. Versus the Sax Man was only the 3rd song I ever made, so it's amazing it didn't make the cut in my first few albums yet has somehow found its place here. The Death Giver 2 ones are from James Luke's Death Giver 2 game, and were mostly made in about half an hour or so, but there's a surprising amount of variety to them, and I do like listening to them. Destruction Darius 1's theme tune is here as well. No point in showing the second when it's not done yet though. But with this album out of the way, who knows what I might embark upon next. When I was younger, I loved starting new things. I seldom finished anything, and that's such a shame, because I have so little to show for all the projects I used to work on. Me finishing this Audio Crime 2 album is a personal triumph of mine, because it's shown me that I can return to stuff I've lost interest in, and to rekindle that love, and to finish and to release it, and to be able to be proud of it. All this is not quite as exciting as starting on something new, but it's probably more important to be able to finish what you've already started. 2023 has been a year of finishing older projects for me, and I am so happy to have something like Audio Crime 2 to show for all my troubles. So thank you for listening to it with me. I'll end with the final song on the B-side, aptly named A Click Getaway.